know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we choose one year at random and select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. This week, we are talking about an album released in 1998. And if you want to hear us talk about a little bit more of 1998, head over to our Patreon. For $1, you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. Last week, we did a Master Punk Theater on the film SLC Punk, originally released in 1998. And one of the most recognizable or famous punk films.
Yeah, that's a big one. A lot of personal history in that one. Probably the first punk movie I've ever... Well, no, that's not true, because we watched Return of the Living Dead on TV at our grandparents' house. Definitely a formative movie, for better or worse.
Yeah. And if you want to join at the $10 tier, you get to choose what album we devote an entire episode to. We had 2 sign up in the exact same day this week, so that's very fun. So we got a couple of those coming your way. Patreon.com/punklotopod. Yeah, that's the main plug out of the way. Always got to plug the Patreon first. So 1998, it was your turn to be assigned the year. And... it's a year that we've done a couple times now. So I went back and looked. We'd last covered it in August of last year. That's where we did Indecision's Most Precious Blood. Prior to that, we did 88 Fingers Louie, Back on the Streets, which I believe was a Patreon-sponsored episode.
Yeah.
We also covered Rancid's Life Won't Wait. We did that with our buddy Adam Yo. We did Dillinger 4's Midwestern Songs of the Americas, also a Patreon-sponsored episode. Ink and Daggers, the fine art of original sin. We did that with Open City, Dan Yemin and Andy Nelson. Non-compost Mentos, not Mentos. Smile When You Hate. We did that with Bedtime Magic. And way back at episode 72, Radon's 28 and Discounts Love Billy with good friend Corey. So we've had a lot of guests on 1998 episodes.
Yeah.
And 2 patron sponsored for 98.
Yeah. We've done some pretty big stuff, and we've done some pretty obscure stuff. It's an interesting year to look at.
Yeah, so we're continuing our trying to pick the popular record to help grow our audience a little bit. It's a really funny idea to be like, what if we talked about albums that people actually knew?
Yeah. What if we talked about records that had major cultural impacts and had well-documented stories attached to them that we could spend most of the episode talking about, instead of, I like this hardcore record from a band no one listens to. Yeah, a novel idea.
Yeah. But, so we kind of landed on this one pretty quickly. Like, I gave you the year, and you were like, well, that's a pretty big one. We should probably just do that. And you just, selected very quickly.
Yeah. There's really not much that I was weighing. As I was looking at the charts, as far as like what blips on the radar, I was like considering Mineral put out In Serenading. That was like, there's like 2 Mineral records, so I was like, is that the one? Well, it kind of doesn't matter. There's only 2, so
yeah.
It could be either one. I maybe very briefly entertained Terraform by Shellac. That would be very timely, but also maybe too much of a bummer.
Yeah.
But Terraform does have my favorite Shellac song. It has Copper on it. So that could be a cool one. I would be interested in listening to that record and talking about it at some point. And then I saw the album that we're talking about today. It's pretty high up on the list. I did consider and maybe suggested this one verbally to you. We could do Goddammit by Alkaline Trio. That would be a pretty big record to talk about. I think ultimately decided to not do that record because we talked about Alkaline Trio before. But that being said, the record by them that we did was not a particularly good record.
Yeah.
Though I do remember it was one that was better than I remember it being. So, a classic Alkaline Trio record is still very much an option in the future. I don't think we'll have trouble picking one of those records some other time. So I was kind of looking for like what's big that maybe we haven't talked about before. I think I threw that Harvey Danger record out there. Where Have All the Merrymakers Gone? Because Flagpole said it's a huge song. I think your argument was, yeah, that song is, but the record's
not so much.
But that is one of those records that people are like, oh, it's actually great.
Yeah, it's one of those records that got like a reappraisal in the 2000s, probably 2010s, even a little bit of it. It's a great record. It was really good.
I think you suggested that Lagwagon record, Let's Talk About Feelings, which would have been very timely because we're recording this on Lagwagon Day.
Yeah, a day that I have never really considered a day because I don't pay attention to Lagwagon, but
it's just they have a song called May 16. So
anytime a band has a song with with a date in it, that tends to be their day now, which is fine. I like that. Never done a Lagwagon.
It also makes Jawbreaker Day one of the worst Jawbreaker songs.
True, it really is.
And not this, but I did throw this out there. Eve 6 by Eve 6 was like, that's a big one.
Yeah, I think it falls in the Harvey Dangerfield of like, not Harvey Dangerfield. That is very funny that I said it that way.
I tell you, I get no respect.
Get no respect. Yeah, in that same realm of like, yeah, it's got a really popular song on it, but people don't know the album. I mean, I'm a big fan of.
A lot of people bought that CD on the strength of that one song.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe one day. I mean, I love that record. One that I had growing up.
Otherwise, I didn't go very far because I was not seeing much else that I would have wanted to talk about that kind of fit our requirement of it being an important record or a popular record. There's a Kid Dynamite record. That would certainly be an important record, but may not be quite that popular.
Yeah.
Versus, the record that I did pick that's, a genre classic. So, it's like which one, what should I talk about? A great record or a very popular, very important record that many people would say is a great record? We can get into whether it is a great record or not, but
yeah. If I would have chosen, what would I have picked? I don't know. I mean, I may have wound up selecting this record as well, but I guess if we go like a little deeper,
Adore by the Smashing Pumpkins.
Yes. Where Blood and Fire Bring Rest by Zayo, pretty important record, one that I really enjoy quite a bit. So that would be a little, but it's still slightly deeper than your average, selection that we could have done. Like Coalesce is Functioning on Impatience as well, another really good record. That Knapsack record could have been a pretty big one. Knapsack's a weird band though, that they feel more cult and more just like, if you like Sam I Am, you'll probably like Knapsack, that kind of punk.
Knapsack's not exactly a household name.
No. Yeah, and 98's interesting. There's a lot of stuff this year, and I'd say it's probably a pretty big year in general. But like going through this list and kind of seeing what like sparks, interest or, something in me that goes, oh, that'd be cool to talk about. I'm having a little bit of a hard time trying to get that.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff that you could probably talk about, like The Locust or Lungfish. That are pretty important, but I also don't really want to listen to.
Swinging Others released 5 Lessons Learned. That would be a fun record to do. That's like my favorite period of Swinging Others, that mid to late 90s era. Over the James by Avail. That would be a good one to do, because we talked about which Avail record should we do. Over the James probably would be the one to do, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about fucking In the Aeroplane Over the Sea.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree that should even be on this chart, but
no,
yes.
It's more there because it is an influence on folk punk than it is actually a folk punk record.
Right.
Because there really isn't any folk punk prior to this that could be considered an influence on it. It's definitely one of those things where it's like, well, this is certainly where most folk punks got a lot of their ideas and kind of arrive at the same conclusions. But, in terms of, it's like calling Violent Femmes folk punk. It's like, you could say that.
I mean, otherwise we could have gone like the deeper route. Like the Bananas released Forbidden Fruit. That's a really fun record. There's the Bread and Circuits album. There's the Roadside Monument record. I Am the Day of the Current Taste. A lot of good stuff. But yeah, you're right. It would just be just a little bit more off the beaten path as far as what to talk about. So let's get into it then. So I gave you the year 1998 and you selected Frame and Canvas by Braid. On the band. From Champaign, Illinois, they formed in 1993. This album was released April 7th, 1998 on Polyvinyl Records, and this is the band's third full-length album. The person on this record is Damon Atkinson on drums, Todd Bell on bass, Chris Broach on guitar and vocals, and Bob Nana on guitar and vocals. And the album was produced by the band and Jay Robbins. Jay Robbins popping up a lot lately on stuff that he produced. So, very funny. The first question, what made you choose this album out of all these other big records that you didn't choose?
I mean, like I said, it's a very important record. The last Braid record for a while.
Yeah.
And certainly really, really important to Midwest emo. And I think, is actually properly classified as Midwest emo. I think it meets our criteria for popular and critically praised enough. It's something to talk about. I think it's a record that's gonna stand out as might appeal to a lot of listeners if we're just gonna be crass and only motivated by popularity. But that's not. I mean, we could have picked. Like I said, there's other records that are probably more popular that we could have picked that I don't know that I really felt equipped to talk about. This is definitely one that I have pretty long personal history with, or at least a personal history with that goes pretty far back. And I guess there was the question of, I think this is a record that would be considered a classic, a Midwest emo classic, an emo classic in general, and one that I certainly at one point or another in my life would have classified as a great record and a pretty high ranking personal favorite. So that was my thinking. Like, I know this record, it's important. There's plenty to talk about just from my own personal perspective. And then there's, the legacy of the record and the band and all of that to get into. So
I didn't know they were so important to you. I mean, because they're not that important to me, really.
Yeah.
And it's not a band that you particularly talk about very much. I mean, I guess for me personally, I had it downloaded on my computer. I liked it. But it wasn't one that I listened to a ton of times. It's not one that I came back to a lot. And I was never really sure what I thought about the band Braid. I always thought they were maybe they're a good band that I like that one record from. And then I hadn't listened to much else by them, but not a band that means a lot to me personally. I definitely get more out of Hey Mercedes than I do Braid. But I think that's just because I came to both of them after both of them were done. So I was, had their whole discographies to check in on and see what I like the most. So yeah, I didn't spend a ton of time with Braid. Like this record is probably the one I listened to the most, and it probably would have been like because you said to listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to rate the importance of Braid to me because when I got into them, I got really into them.
Really? I have no memory of this. When was this happening?
In college. I listened to them a bunch in college. And that was really it. I mean, it was like, the last 3 years that I was in college, I listened to Braid a bunch, like all the time, which is, so that time period was 2009, 10, especially 2009 and 2010 when I was listening to them the most. That was the time period where emo revival was blowing up. All your Algernon Cadwallader and Snowing and, all of those twinkle emo bands that were doing the Midwest emo stuff. So Braid, I got into Braid, I think really off of that. I can't even pinpoint what prompted me to start listening to Braid. I just saw their name mentioned, I guess, a lot on Tumblr, and I saw their stuff getting posted. They're like, oh, this is an important band. This is a big influence on, all of these bands that I was listening to. And I would guess I wouldn't be surprised if this was a band that I got all of their records off of like a blog that did, because a lot of times blogs would post the discographies of older bands. Mm-hmm. They would just be like, here's every record by so-and-so. Yeah. I wouldn't be shocked if I got all of their records from there. I could have gone piece by piece. I'm not sure. Well, it looks like it was, according to my last FM, my first plays from Braid were June and July of 2009. So this was when I was sitting in the yard listening to the Black Flag discography. I was also listening to the Braid discography, or at least Frame and Canvas, maybe some other songs. But so, yeah, boredom is why I got into Braid. But they stuck with me. They did stick with me, and I listened to them really intensely for quite a while. And then, they reunited. And then I think I stopped caring. Because I did not really love the new material that they released when they got back together. I want to say there was an EP. Yeah, there's an EP in 2011 when they first got back together. They did like a split with Balance and Composure. I want to say maybe they had, and then there's the album No Coast in 2014. And the EP was all right. I didn't love it. And then by the time they had a full length, I was out of college for a little while and was probably getting pretty bored with the Midwest emo stuff. And so that record, No Coast, I know I heard it, but it didn't do anything for me. And I probably saw them at Fest that year.
Really?
Or it might have been the year before.
I've never watched them at Fest, I don't think. They played a few times, but I don't think I've ever actually watched their set.
Because Fest 13, no, it would have been my first Fest. It would have been Fest 12. So that was 2013. I definitely, because I saw them in the venue. I don't remember if anyone played. I think I just kind of like stayed in there, and you maybe went and saw someone else, and then you came back for whoever was after. Like maybe Boy Sets Fire was after them, or
maybe
like that.
Maybe that was the one. Yeah, because I'd never
even
seen
Sam I Am. I don't know.
Yeah,
and that was it. Like that was kind of it. Like my listening to Braid, it like falls off a cliff after 2014, 2015.
I had this and Age of Octane on a computer. I listened to this one more than that one, and like that's kind of it. That's kind of the extent of it. I didn't listen to this record a ton. It's not one of my ones I went back to a lot.
I remember running into Robbie from our Forgetters story from Muscle and Bone at Harvest Records at probably a record store day, and I want to say that I got a copy of Frame and Canvas, like a used copy there. And I remember running into him, and I feel like he said something like, "Oh yeah, I already have their best record." Age of Octane, so I don't need anything else. It's like, oh, weird. I thought this was the one that everyone liked. So that's kind of a debate, I think.
I don't think it's that much of a debate.
I think a lot of people liked Age of Octane more. I think Braid likes Age of Octane more, or at least Bob Nana ranked this one lower.
It's definitely their most popular album, their most listened to record, and the one that's kind of like cited as the most influential. But yeah, I don't know. I listened to Age of Octane too this week, and I don't think that's the best record. I think Frame and Canvas is way better than Age of Octane.
Well, Age of Octane is a lot slower.
Yeah. Let's get into a little bit of the
probably largely due to changing drummers.
Yeah, maybe. Let's get into a little bit of the backstory. So prior to Braid, Bob Nana was in a band called Friction. They're from Chicago. And then Braid was started as a side project while Friction was working on their first full-length album. Friction broke up in 1994, and then Braid became the top priority. Also worth mentioning that Bob Nana had entered college in 1993. So he's starting college at the same time he's starting Braid. They released their first record, Frankie Welfare Boy Age 5, in 1995. Then their second album, The Age of Octane, in 96. And then in 1997, the founding drummer, Roy Ewing, had grown tired of touring, and he wanted to, step down from the band. And Braid brought in a new drummer, Damon Atkinson, with Roy's blessing, because Damon had played with the band figurehead before, and then he filled in for Roy previously on a few instances. And Bob says Damon hits the drums harder than Roy. He said Roy had a lighter, jazzier style drumming, so it could be the reason why these records are slightly different. One is definitely a lot lighter than the other. But in 1997 is also the year that Bob graduates from college, which now means they can go full-time as a band. And so they immediately went into headlining. They headlined a tour in Europe, but when they got there and played their first show, the tour was with the Get Up Kids, and the Get Up Kids had a way better crowd reaction, so they flipped to have the Get Up Kids be the headliner the rest of the tour. And this is the band going like full steam ahead.
They toured a lot. They toured with the Get Up Kids a lot.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they toured a bunch. They toured everywhere too. Like they toured in Canada with Discount, and they toured Japan at some point. Like, yeah, they really hit the road really hard.
Yeah, Chris Broach dropped out of college because the band was taking off. They said like the day that Bob graduated from college, they got in the van and went to Washington, D.C. to start recording the record with Jay Robbins. Like they probably toured a lot before, but more like summer tours and like little stints. But then being like graduated from college, all right, let's go full time touring, which I'm wondering if that was a mistake, but we could get to that. So they were previously on a label called Mud, and then the band really wanted to sign with someone bigger, so they sent their music to like Touch and Go and Merge, and they apparently like tried to get in touch with Jade Tree, but Jade Tree never responded to them, so they didn't even get their demo sent to them or anything like that. They wound up working with Polyvinyl because they were friends with the founders of the label, and Bob and Todd had their own label called Grand Theft Autumn that they had previously done a split release with Polyvinyl, so it just made sense to release it with Polyvinyl, which at the time Polyvinyl was not very big. Like they were still fairly new, and they hadn't quite hit all their big bands yet.
Yeah, Polyvinyl started in 96, 95. Their roster at the time was, let's see, Rainer Maria. You know,
Yeah.
in '99 they put out American Football.
Yeah. Most of the bigger stuff comes out after this record. They went with Jay Robbins to record this record because they really liked what he did on the Promise Ring album before. So good choice. At the time, Jay was pretty busy with putting out stuff, and that same year also produced Orange Rhyming Dictionary by Just to Brazil, Blue Tips Join Us, and I mentioned it earlier, but Roadside Monuments, I Am the Day of the Current Taste.
Yeah, which was also passed on by Jade Tree.
What was Jade Tree's deal? It's the kind of stuff they would have put out. It's what it is. What's surprising about it? But I guess they were like, we're all in on this Blake record right now. And yeah, they record the record, and then it winds up becoming like their best-selling album. It becomes like a real crowd pleaser, and they just tour. They just tour nonstop for the next 2 years. So I guess there's just that. Well, we haven't been able to do as much touring, so we need to go all out on it. And I think ultimately that's probably what burned the band out, because by '99 they're done. They break up.
A year of touring killed them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was and ultimately it boiled down to Chris didn't want to do it. Really, Chris Broach.
Yeah.
He didn't want to keep touring all the time, and I think he wanted to go back and finish college, because he was probably like, I shouldn't have dropped out of college to spend all of my free time in the van. Because they played the West Coast with Seaweed. They played another cross country tour with kind of like Spitting. Yeah, they were originally supposed to tour Europe with Hot Water Music, but it ended up being the Get Up Kids, which was exactly the time for the Get Up Kids to blow up.
Yeah. So you were talking about Midwestern emo earlier, and as I was listening to this record, I was like, is this a Midwestern emo record? Because in my mind, Midwestern emo is a little slower. It's more mineral than it is this. Like, this feels a little more, I don't know, more forward, more, I don't know. My definition of Midwestern emo is like a little more twinkly in general, but I guess it does. What, the Promise Ring and Jimmy Eat World and who else? Braid. Like, they all get that Midwestern emo tag, but I don't know. They don't really. I don't know if it just wasn't that defined in that time period. I guess back then it's just like they're from the Midwest and they play emo, so they're a Midwestern emo band.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it was. It's called Midwest emo because there was just a very heavy concentration of emo bands in the Midwest. Like, I've never really felt like Midwest emo was a good genre descriptor, because it doesn't work. Like, I mean, and it gets honestly, it just gets applied to everything from the 90s. It's like Sunny Day Real Estate and Christie Front Drive and Cap and Jazz. Like, for one, Sunny Day Real Estate are from Washington. I don't know. It can't all be Midwest emo. There needs to be a specific sound that describes Midwest emo, which I think people have latched on to, like the specifically twinkly stuff and carried that forward, which I think Braid has enough of. They definitely have the noodly, jazzy, math rocky kind of guitars.
To me, it has more in common with like the more driving, more punkier sounding stuff, and then a mix of the Discord records, the DC post-hardcore sound. Like, to me, it's more that. But yeah, I guess Midwestern emo is just, they are from Chicago. And the record before is a lot slower and probably has a lot more in common with Mineral than this record does. But to me, this has like more in common with the Get Up Kids, which, do we call them Midwestern emo? I mean, they're from Kansas.
But I think a lot of people do consider the Get Up Kids a Midwest emo band. They're like the most pop punk version of it. But I feel like you can also, like, you could say Rainer Maria are a Midwest emo band, and they have like huge crescendos and like, complicated counter melodies and that finally line up into like huge harmony parts. Like, I don't, I don't know. It's like I said, I don't think Midwest emo is a very good, useful, specific enough genre term. But I think Braid, as much as that term can encompass a lot of different bands, I think Braid lands somewhere close to the middle, especially when you consider their discography overall. This record, maybe not as much because it is so much harder hitting. And I think, they were definitely really influenced by Jawbox and Fugazi, and there was other things going into it. They were as much drawing from, Kerosene 454. They were drawing from a lot of other places. Like, they weren't just looking to their peers or like a core regional sound.
Yeah. What did you think of the record? Revisiting it. When was the last? Well, when did you think you listened to it last?
I think I maybe revisited it like in 2017. I think that's the most prominent recent re-listen to the record, and that was a long time ago. Other than maybe a handful of songs, and maybe not even strictly from this record.
I was trying to remember last time I listened to it and like couldn't figure it out. I was like, I don't know. I can check and see last time I listened to it on Last FM. That'd be my best. 2013. Well, it says I listened to 2 songs in 2023, which no memory of that. And then 2 songs in 2013, but 2012 I listened to 7 times. So like, I don't know. And again, that was Age of Octane. Yeah, at least, I don't know. My first year of really, really listening to them would have been 2009, and it's the most I ever listened to them besides this time, prepping for the show.
Yeah. Yeah. Revisiting this record this time, I did not fall in love again. It did not rekindle the relationship, which, I could have told you before picking it. I was like, all right, that's a important record for me, and it's certainly an important record for everybody else. But I'm probably not about to launch into like a huge Braid reappraisal period of my life. I had a pretty clear picture of what the record was in my head before picking it, that on listening to it was not very accurate. I think this record sounds pretty good. I think the basic formula of Braid is pretty good. I like the idea that they shifted into a harder hitting band, a little more focused on like kind of a pop, melody forward approach to the song writing, while still holding on to these intricate, really delicate, clean guitar lines that are like impressive. I think that it's impressive to play these kind of guitar parts and sing, and I like the balance between Bob and Chris. I remember jamming with a drummer in Phoenix a long time ago, and Braid came up in our conversation, and he said something like, "Yeah, I never really got into Braid. Like, I just don't care for singers. I prefer singers who like can't sing and like don't try to sing right." And I feel like Bob is like a guy who really can't sing very well, but does try to sing better than he should. Something along those lines. I'm like, I think Bob's a pretty decent singer.
Yeah, I think Bob's like, a good singer.
That's a weird way of describing his voice that I don't think is accurate. He's certainly not the most well-trained vocalist, but like, I think he, knows what he's doing for the most part.
Yeah.
I also appreciate the ways in which he does reach for something that's a little technically harder and doesn't hit it perfectly. But he still does it because I think the idea is still communicated. Yeah. That guy also couldn't. We ended up not jamming again because he couldn't get into a groove. And I'm like, all right. I mean, you're the drummer. Guy who wants to do like Pixies and Fugazi influenced stuff.
You need to be able to groove if you're doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's like, you could have tried harder to get us locked in. But yeah, I don't know. And I like Chris just like yelling
Yeah,
in the background, which on this record, he his vocals are much more upfront on this record because he was tired of always getting turned down in the mix.
Yeah.
So he like pushed for his vocals to be louder, and I think it works. I think it was the right call. I think it gives it a lot of energy, even if he's mostly just contributing. Hey. I think the sound of the band still works for me, and I enjoy it. But listening to the record, the album as an album, the A side is just one song. Like the whole A side, I'm like, well, I really remember this record having a lot more variety to it. But all of these songs are like hey, like every song. Like it's a pretty good sound, but these songs don't really differentiate from each other very much at all. But I think the B side on the LP starts with A Dozen Roses, which is the slow song with like a tambourine, and it's much more subdued. It's very different from everything else. Has a really nice build up. I think it's a really pretty song. I think it's a really good song. It's probably the best one on the record for me. I was like, oh, there it is. But then the rest of the record is kind of just the A side again.
I don't know. I feel like the A side has the more standout tracks on it. I thought that New Youth in Detroit starts it off, and then Killing a Camera, which I think might be one of the best songs on the record. Killing a Camera and The First Day Back, I think, are the two best songs. And then Never Will Come For Us is a slower song. I mean, I guess Collect from Clark Kent and Milwaukee Skyrocket are pretty similar sounding. But when we get to the B side, I'm like, I don't know. I think most of the B side sounds the same. Well, besides like the weird percussion they throw in there on like Urbana's Too Dark and Constellation Prizefighter, I think the strongest songs are all on the A side.
Urbana's Too Dark really reminds me of, I guess it's like A Dozen Roses going into that song reminds me a lot of what Roadside Monument was doing on both of those two records. Yeah, Never Will Come For Us. I misspoke. I had a little bit of a blind spot for that one because that one is a little slower, and but it does the thing. It does the sequencing thing.
Oh yeah, track 3 slow song. Yeah.
Like start strong, get stronger. Let's cool it off.
That song does pick back up in the track, but it starts slow. Like it really starts slow. It helps though that it's sandwiched between Killing a Camera and First Day Back, because those are the two, to me, are the two best songs, because they have like the biggest hooks on the record are those two tracks.
Yeah, and Never Will Come For Us does have a big chorus.
Yeah,
with singing the name of the song.
Yeah, so like Braid is a band, like I listened to this record, I listened to the other records too a long time ago. I like Framing Cameras at the time, but like I fall off of it, don't listen to it much again, and then in my mind my brain has like decided I don't like them. I think my brain was like, who cares about Braid? And like I don't know if it's just because they got cited so much by bands that I did not like, that I feel like that kind of hurt them, and they're brought up as like one of the peak albums of the genre from this time period. And I don't know, maybe they just got name checked too often, but my brain just like kind of put them lower and lower like every time I thought about them. So revisiting this record, like putting it on, I was like, oh yeah, I used to really like this record. I did really like this album. And so like re-listening to it, I was like, oh, I get it. I mean, like I get why it became kind of the legendary record and one that people talked about, but yeah, I think I needed to like kind of like reappraise it just for my own sake, because I had started to really lower it in my mind as far as how good it actually is. Which a lot of those, I kind of do that with the Promise Ring too, and I do wind up liking that record a lot more. I listened to the Get Up Kids record enough from this era to really still like that one.
Well, so that Get Up Kids record, a band with a formula as much as Braid had a formula,
Mm-hmm.
a stronger variety of songs.
Yeah.
I think as big as like Killing a Camera and First Day Back are on this record as songs, they're very much the same kind of song.
Yeah.
They feel so similar to me. And that's kind of how everything on the record is. All of the slow material here, with the exception of like A Dozen Roses, feels pretty much the same. And all of the faster material on here feels pretty much the same. Like they just blur together, and it's not unpleasant. It's enjoyable enough to listen to, but I'm just not compelled to pick out very many individual songs from this record to be like, that's a great song. Like, they're just good, really good even. But like, yeah, like the Promise Ring, records from this time period. Promise Ring was a band I didn't really get into in college, that hearing them much later, I go, oh, there's something really interesting there. So I would say this record, going off of memory, is probably still their best. I haven't listened to Age of Octane.
I did. I re-listened to it because I'm doing a new thing whatever album we listen to, I listen to the albums on either end, either side of it as well. So I listened to the Age of Octane and I was like, this is boring. This record's boring. Slow and boring. Did not like it. It was fine. It was, yeah. It did not have like the hooks that this record had. And then I listened to that 2011 EP that they did. Like, it was their first substantial kind of comeback thing. There was like a 7-inch that came out after this record, but I think those were just B-sides from this recording session of this record. But that EP in 2011, it's like a 4-song EP. I listened to that and I enjoyed it. They remembered what it was about this record that made people like them a lot more than the previous record. So they kind of keep it in the same formula since then. I didn't listen to the 2014 album, but to me, they were like, yeah, Frame and Canvas is the one, because they've done multiple like album tours for this record. Like, they did this in its entirety, I think, on 2 separate tours now at this point. So like, they know this is everyone's favorite record. I mean, they may not necessarily think it is, but I do, from what I've heard. I don't think I'm going to go back and listen to Frankie Welfare Boy Age 5 and be like, this is their best record.
Even when I loved Braid, like, was listening to them all the time, Frankie Welfare Boy was like, there's a couple songs, but overall as a record, it's not great. It's not very good, honestly. Now, it's probably been almost as long since I was listening to Braid a lot that I have listened to Hey Mercedes, but kind of going from memory and what I know Hey Mercedes sounds like as a band, I think I might now be one of those guys who thinks Hey Mercedes was the better band.
Hey, that's where I am. I've always liked Hey Mercedes a lot more. They were one that I did listen to a lot. Like, I stuck with them. I think that's one that kept in my rotation for a while there. And I liked it because it was like the catchier, hookier stuff from this record. And it's worth noting that Hey Mercedes is everyone from Braid minus Chris Broach.
Yeah.
So like the rest of them are, I don't know, maybe that's, I don't know. Chris wanted to leave. He wanted to like go back to college and just, they were burned out from touring so much. But maybe Chris Broach's guitar, maybe Chris is the one who's doing the more like angular post-hardcore stuff, because the Hey Mercedes stuff is like much more straight ahead songwriting wise, like, guitar wise, more Jimmy Eat World sounding.
It's much more like, Jimmy Eat World, Get Up Kids.
Yeah, poppier stuff.
Yeah, I think Chris is the one playing the more complex stuff. I think there is something very special about Chris's guitar playing. It's almost like he's soloing the entire song. He's just playing very prominent lead guitar the entire time, which I think is like the right way to do it when you're going to have 2 guitar players. I'm just like, let that one guy just rip as hard as they can the whole time. Like, otherwise, I don't know. What's the point? It's just 2 guitars playing chunky chords.
One thing I noticed while listening to this, a couple weeks ago we did the Piebald record. We Are the Only Friends That We Have, and then I found that interview where he said that like Framing Canvas was one of the records he borrowed the most riffs from. I hear it. Listening to this record, I was like, oh, this is like part of their Piebald's whole sound is just doing Braid, specifically this album. Like those weird kind of like guitar parts that I'm assuming Chris is the one doing them. Just like those weird, just like sliding the guitar up and leaving like a weird like release type, riff.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I actually do that a lot. I think I subconsciously picked that up from Braid too.
Yeah, I was listening to it. I was like, oh, this is real. He said
like
it's
like a whip snap kind of thing.
Yeah, and they definitely use that in Piebald's music. So like I hear that a lot in here. So in a way that that really highlights like how influential this record really is.
Well, it is. It is and it isn't. Because like Piebald took a lot of influence from this, but who else? Immediately after this sound kind of just fades away. I mean, it really gives into the Fall Out Boy emo period.
Yeah, this is that last little period of emo that you can still see the tracing from original emo before it turns into like, your Fall Out Boys, My Chemical Romance, that huge wave of that type of emo stuff. That stuff I feel like does not borrow at all from stuff like Braid. To me, that stuff's borrowing more from like pop punk in general, sonically, and then just like maybe vocally. They tend to be more emo influenced, but whenever it came back to the emo revival, Braid were always referenced as like an influence or like they were name checked by bands, but like nobody actually sounded like them though. Most of them were doing Kinsella style guitar work, especially that first big wave of emo revival. But there wasn't a ton doing like this kind of emo, a little bit thicker sound, a little bit more low end to it, a little less twinkly. And I don't know if it's just because then Braid kind of came back too, like while that emo revival was still going on, because like Bob Nana was always doing stuff.
Yeah. Was Braid the first big post emo revival reunion?
Well, I think they beat
2011
they beat American football
early.
Get Up Kids never really went away.
Yeah.
Jimmy World didn't go away. American football came back later. I don't know what the Promise Ring did during that period, or like Hot Rod Circuit or anybody like that. Yeah, I mean, maybe.
Promise Ring never put anything else out.
Okay. They just play shows then.
Yeah. And probably not even that often.
Yeah.
I remember Braid coming back, and I remember that being like like, are they going to ruin it?
You mean like,
it's just like they're doing the thing. You're not risky to come back from that long of a break, put out new music.
Yeah.
We don't want new music from you. We want the old music. But it was kind of like, all right, Bob did stuff, in the intervening years.
Yeah. Hey Mercedes in the 2000s. Hey Mercedes kind of broke up kind of 04. The reason why that like 04 Braid reunion even happened is because Hey Mercedes had to like stop for whatever reason. I don't remember if they were done or what, but say Hey Mercedes. Yeah, they broke up in 05. City on Film, that was Bob's solo thing. He did an 05 record and a 2014 record. He did Certain People I Know, but I think that was actually after the Braid reunion. Lifted Bells, that's an even later thing he's doing. Yeah.
Well, the Appleseed cast never went away either. They just turned into like a post-rock band.
Yeah, I was going to pull up emo specifically for 1998 to see who's like active. Sunny Day Real Estate, I think they came back a lot later. When did Mineral come back?
We saw them at Fest.
Yeah.
That was like 2015. They were late.
Okay.
Mineral coming back was later than I would have expected for how popular that scene was when Braid came back.
Yeah, I don't know. Is this a record that you think grew more after they broke up? I feel like
broke
Braid
up so soon after it.
Yeah, I think Braid was one of those bands that like maybe broke up too soon.
Yeah.
And so then it got that little bit of legacy of being like, oh, but if they just stayed together, because they made their best record, what if they, kept going? Usually bands don't end on their best record.
they should have just kept going without Chris.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I mean, it probably would have just sounded like Hey Mercedes. I mean,
You know, I understand. I guess I understand that it's a significantly different sounding band without Chris's contributions, but I think at that point they didn't have that consistent of a sound.
yeah, I mean, I think Chris wanting to leave was a big part of it, but I think they were burned out by the touring. Like they having money problems because you're just a touring band, permanently touring, not happy about being on the road all the time, and the conditions they wear on you, especially if you're like not really growing at a rate that they'd been them going full time. I don't think anything changed about the size of the crowds they were playing and the types of tours they were doing. I just think they just did way more of them. Yeah, and maybe that was the case. They're like, man, we're not really like going up to that next level. And then they went in to record some demos in '99. I guess they were going to work on something new. And they came out of that demo recording session being like, yeah, we're done. They just like agreed to be finished. So I wonder if it's a case of if they just stayed the way they were before and just doing like stints instead of touring nonstop, if they would have stuck around longer. And I don't know why like Hey Mercedes didn't start that long after Braid. So
no. Yeah, it started in like 2000. First album.
But maybe that wasn't
2001.
a full-time band. It was just more of a stints.
Yeah. I don't know that they were super active.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's just, going full time. I think is the thing that actually killed this band. Now they said there was some creative differences, like and Chris wasn't really happy with the direction they were going to. So I don't know. Yeah, I think it's a case of they broke up too soon after their peak, and then that created the whole like mythos around the band of they were so good and we never got to see the full extent of what Braid could have been. But that also is what like makes bands special too in a lot of ways. Because when they did come back, they put out a record that do people like that record? Is it well regarded?
I don't think it's like beloved, but I think people like it. I think it's kind of one of those records that's by most accounts like good enough to justify them reuniting. I'm sure there are people that just hate it, but I don't think that's the consensus.
It's one of those that's like
we didn't ask for this, but it's fine.
Yeah. It like doesn't hurt your legacy, but it's not like it didn't wow people. It is the lowest rated on Rate Your Music. It's got a 3.12 and Frankie Welfare Boy has a 3.22. So like it's not as good as that record is kind of what people think. I haven't heard it, but I think I would probably like it more than Frankie Welfare Boy. I don't think I've ever listened to that record in its entirety though, because it's just a little bit too rough for me. But yeah, it's one of those ones where like we're not mad it came out, but it's like you didn't come back with like one of your best records either, which doesn't happen very often. That topic keeps coming up. When a band comes back, has a band ever come back and put out something that's as well regarded as their best material or better? That's almost a no, never. You know, they might put out some good stuff, but it's never as well regarded as the best stuff or better. So then it's kind of like, well, then why do the return? I mean, I get the return from a live touring standpoint and people getting to see you who didn't get to see you before.
Yeah.
And I guess when you get together, you get that itch where you want to try and like write a new record, see how it sounds. But yeah, I guess you just don't want to embarrass yourself.
Yeah. It's always that. Well, then it's like people coming to see you want to see the old stuff, but you got a new record and you want to play your new stuff. And it's like, that's such a hard, don't break up.
Yeah.
That's number one. If you think you might want to be doing this band again, don't stop.
I understand taking breaks. I understand being like, we toured too much, but take a year off and then come do some little short stints. Like maybe being on the road all year long is not a great idea. Because I feel like that how many bands has touring nonstop been the thing that actually killed the band? Or at least caused like massive member changeover.
Yeah. You're going to Europe twice in like a year.
Yeah. I'm always amazed when bands that like with a lot of band members like keep most of the same band members the whole time. Like Fire and Frenzy is a great example. They had one member turnover in their initial 10-year run as a band. Like the guitar player quit. And that was it. They got a new guitar player and they kept going. The new drummer might be what contributes to this record sounding as like big as it does, but also working with Jay Robbins too. I think they got in there with someone who's like really good at recording artists. They liked what he did with The Promise Ring, and the Kerosene 454 was like the other record that they cited as why they wanted to use J. Robbins.
Yeah.
J. Robbins stuff in general sounds pretty slick and big.
They recorded it at Don Z's studio in her ear.
Yeah.
In Alexandria, because
I guess Birdcage exist yet?
That's probably where J. Robbins was recording for most of this time period.
Yeah. Who did Age of Octane? I don't really know Mud Records at all either. Apparently it was mostly a local label. They only put out local stuff.
The Magpie Cage was originally Oz recording studio where Shudder to Think, Girls Against Boys, Texas Is the Reason, and I want to say Jawbox recorded For Your Own Special Sweetheart there. So he bought that studio 2012 when he started Magpie Cage.
Discogs doesn't say who produced that last record. I wonder if they did themselves then. Yeah, no producer credited with that record, so just them, I guess. And to me, it's a huge step up.
Massively influential records and going, yeah, I didn't like it as much.
Yeah, we have. I don't think we do it on purpose. I don't think we're like contrarians who are just like me.
We should be more dishonest, probably.
Lie, tell people we love it. I love it.
Yeah,
because I feel like we're gonna get a bunch of I love this albums whenever we post it to social media.
Yeah, I think
because I've gotten a lot of that for the Black Flag episode.
I think we need to do a better job of recognizing what other people love about it and pretend that that's our opinion as well, so that we are socially accepted.
Yeah, I mean, does this mean I like it better than you this time around?
I think this time you liked it more.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah,
I didn't dislike it. I mean, I didn't dislike it. I think it's a good record, but I just struggled to find that much to really latch onto and single out, which maybe isn't a bad thing. Oh, this record doesn't have high enough highs that soar over all of the other terrible material on the record. Like, it's just too consistent. What a flaw.
Yeah. I mean, from what I've listened to, I didn't revisit Frankie Welfare, and I didn't listen to the new record, but definitely think it's their best record. Some of their biggest and best songs. And I get why it became the record it became because of when it came out, how good it sounds. I could see how it became influential on the later generations. And I think it's a good record. I mean, if we're gonna rate it, I would put it at just under a 4, like a 3.75, almost a 4, but not quite there for me.
Yeah, I would still say this is like a solid 4 record. I mean, despite my criticisms of it, I think that ultimately the basic sound of the band on the record wins, and that makes it work.
Yeah, and I can't say it's gonna be. I mean, I don't know. I can't say that about most records we've covered on the show, but like I'm probably not gonna come to it anytime soon. But I wonder what the percentage of albums that we've covered on this show that I've even actually ever come back to. Like I haven't looked to see. Listening to it in preparation and researching it and talking about it extensively kind of like wears it out to a point where like I don't necessarily want to hear that for a minute. But
there's probably more instances where I listen to a record and then like a year later we talked about it on the show.
Yeah.
Then there are records that we talked about on the show that I then wanted to listen to again.
But yeah, good record. Understandable why it's as iconic as it is. Especially when you compare it to everything else at the same time. I could see this being in like the top 10 best emo albums of the 90s. Like specifically like third wave emo. But this is third wave, right? Or is this second?
I would say it's third wave.
Yeah.
But I don't know what people... To me, the waves of emo are first wave, Revolution, Summer.
I guess this technically falls under second wave.
Second wave being... See, I've always differentiated the emo core bands that followed the Revolution Summer into like the bands that were going more even towards screamo in the early 90s. Like I've always considered like the Gravity Records kinds of bands and like the San Diego bands and California bands emo core bands as second wave, and third wave really starts with Sunny Day Real Estate, and that's what I've always classified as indie emo, and that really just kind of encompasses all of the, your rev emo bands, your Midwest emo bands, your pop punk emo bands, your Saves the Day and Get Up Kids and Jimmy Eat World stuff that leads into fourth wave, being the Fall Out Boy stuff, and fifth wave is the revival stuff. And I don't recognize any waves after that.
Well, it hasn't changed enough after that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what is.
That's too
where
many
the
waves.
second and third waves are.
I mean, honestly, that's too many waves of a subgenre.
Third wave, at least according to this website that I'm randomly reading, is more referring to like the Warped Tour, Taking Back Sunday, My Chemical Romance, that kind of stuff. So Braid would probably fall under the second wave,
I guess. Yeah, and I mean, it probably makes sense to say the Revolution summer bands and like through Still Life, those kinds of bands.
Yeah, I think the Bay Area
are all
stuff
the
would
same.
fall under the second, the first wave. Anything that's like specifically trying to go for that embrace, right, spring sound, I feel like is all first wave. And the second wave is your Sunny Day Real Estates and your Jimmy Eat Worlds and your Braids. Third wave is the Warped Tour Hot Topic emo, and then I guess fourth is the revival, and then fifth is current. But yeah,
it is sixth wave.
Is sixth real? I don't think we're really at sixth wave.
Is sixth wave third wave revival?
I mean, there was that wave.
Yeah,
doing My Chemical Romance and Paramore. I don't know. I don't think there's a real sixth wave. I have seen people say stuff like, what, Glass Beach might be like sixth wave emo, just because it's borrowing from other stuff, though.
Yeah, and I really don't want to listen to it.
Yeah. Well, I think that'll do it for us this week. Good record. Not the glowing review, I guess you'd expect for such a big record, but
yeah, this is one of those rating doesn't match the body of the review.
Yeah.
It's
well,
good. It's great, even maybe. I just have very negative things to say about it.
I feel like we should have interviewed like 19-year-old you whenever you were listening to it, and then that would have been a more positive review than this one.
But that's the thing, like, as much as I listened to it, then I don't know what I would have said about it.
Yeah. Well, I think that'll do it for us this week. Thank you all so much for listening. You can follow us on all forms of social media at PunkLottoPod. We still have, Threads and Blue Sky, but everybody gave up on those, didn't they? Seemed like those are dead. It's just still Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah.
But you can follow us on all of those platforms at PunkLottoPod. PunkLottoPod, gmail.com, voicemail line 202-688-PUNK, and patreon.com/PunkLottoPod. So thank you all so much, and we will talk to you next time.
To order Punk, call the number on your screen. Rush delivery is available. Remember, this special offer is not sold in stores.